أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
We have one more speaker. This man, he is well known for his deep commitment to spirituality. He was born to Jamaican parents and he accepted Islam in 1992 after reading the autobiography of the famous Malcolm X. He currently works as chaplain at Millhaven Institute in Kingston and continues to help guide people closer to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I would like to welcome Imam Yasin Dwyer to speak on spirituality.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In the name of Allah, most gracious and most merciful, all praise and all thanks belongs to Allah, Lord, cherisher and sustainer of all of the worlds. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most glorified and exalted, to shower His peace, His blessings, His benediction upon our beloved Master Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, upon his family, his companions, and the righteous everywhere. Allahumma ameen. I greet you all, my dear brothers, sisters, and friends, with the greeting words of peace, the greeting words of Islam, the greeting words of paradise. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to be with all of my brothers and sisters, and I'm very honored and also very humbled to be here and to share the stage with our distinguished guests and presenters, especially Dr. Munir. In fact, before I became a Muslim in the early 90s, I was introduced to a handful of lectures by Dr. Munir, and I can say that my own gravitation towards Islam was perhaps in many ways related to a handful of talks that Dr. Munir had given, and many tapes that I had listened to and whatnot, because Dr. Munir, he spoke about qadr and destiny. I was reminded that destiny can be understood in this way, that whatever comes to us was never meant to pass us by, and whatever passes us by was never meant to come to us. And in my own gradual education within the religion of Islam, I realized that before I could really blink or even reflect in a very rational way, I found myself immersed in Islam among Muslims. Although I didn't grow up around many Muslims, but yet I found myself and find myself today among Muslims, actually standing before you and hoping, inshallah, to be able to offer you something of some worth and some benefit that we can take home, inshallah. Much is lost in translation, as Dr. Munir mentioned, and my mother and father are from Jamaica, and although Jamaicans speak English, there is a dialect called Patois. It's like a Creole, like Haitians speak French, Jamaicans speak English with a bit of a twang. And I was reminded of a saying that we have in Patois. A saying that we have in Patois, it goes, Rien afal but doti tough. Rien afal but doti tough. Which means that the rain is falling and the blessings are upon us. The blessings are raining down upon us, but yet the life continues to be a struggle. You have to continue to struggle. You have to continue to move. You have to continue to sweat. The blessings are all around us, but we still have to work. We still have to move. We still have to be engaged in our life and perhaps break a sweat. We have to understand this when we speak about spirituality, when we speak about the journey of our nafs, when we speak about the inner struggle, when we speak about cultivating a truly faithful inner image, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And again, much is lost in translation because most of our translators translate this particular verse in this way, that indeed we made you, O Muhammad, of an exalted character. We made you of an exalted character. But character doesn't necessarily embody the word khuluq. Not necessarily. I was taught the dua, and we know that in Islam there's a dua, there's a supplication for every moment of our existence. When we wake up in the morning, when we greet our brothers, when we greet our sisters, we say Assalamu alaikum. This is dua. We have a dua before we eat, when we finish eating. We have a dua when we leave the house, we enter the house. There's even a dua before you become intimate with your spouse. Imagine that. Imagine, for every moment of our existence there is dua. I learned this particular dua when you see your reflection in the mirror. You say, Allahumma anta hassanta khalqi fa hassin khuluqi. O Allah, as you have beautified my khalq, as you have beautified my outer image, beautify my khuluq. My what? My inner image. The way you look on the inside. So we have a great concern with how we look on the outside. And of course, we should. We should be presentable, look clean, perhaps even be color coordinated. That's excellent. You know, you want your hijab perhaps matching your shoes. That's okay. That's permissible, I think. Yes, sure, it should be permissible. We should make sure that, you know, our shirt is buttoned up properly. You know, before I came here, when I was buttoning up this shirt, I missed a button. I missed a button, and you know, your shirt becomes lopsided. You have to walk like this the whole day. But one of my children told me, you missed a button, right? But if I had looked in the mirror, I would have seen that, well, I wasn't in, you know, tip-top outdoor shape, right? So, O Allah, as you have beautified my outer image, beautify my inner image. The same concern we have with the way we look on the outside, we have to have a similar concern with the way that we look on the inside. How would you describe the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Aisha radiallahu anha, may Allah be very pleased with her. She answered this question. She said, "Kana khuluquhul Quran." That his character was the Quran. His inner image, his personality was the Quran. If you want to understand the Quran, you observe Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're here to speak about the soul. We're here to speak about spirituality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to worship Him alone. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, O humanity, worship your Lord. Worship your Lord who created you and those before you, لعلكم تتقون, so that you may cultivate taqwa, so that you may cultivate God consciousness. The first commandment in the Quran is to worship Allah. The first commandment is to worship Allah. For what purpose? So that we may cultivate a consciousness, an awareness, a fear of God Almighty. And the first prohibition in the Quran, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And do not set up idols. Do not set up objects of worship with God when you know better than that. When you know better than to set up objects of worship beside the Creator of the heavens and the earth. We know better than that, than to bow to the creation rather than the Creator. But we oftentimes have this image of idolatry as being something directed towards something material. As the Arabs of Mecca in the 7th century, they literally bowed to idols made from their own hands. They bowed to them. But the idolatry that we must be concerned about is a bit more subtle. It's more insidious. It is material, but it's much more internal rather than external. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you not seen the one who takes their own desire as their object of worship? Have you not seen that person? Have you not seen that person that worships themselves? They worship themselves. The struggle that we have, brothers and sisters, is this. I work with Corrections Canada. I work as a chaplain with many of our brothers and some sisters who have broken the law and have been convicted of crime. And there is a tendency that's very explicit within the prison population, and actually perhaps explicit, but in many ways more implicit among those who are outside, is that we always look for someone or something outside of ourselves to blame. But I remind myself first, and I remind my brothers who are incarcerated, that when you point the finger at someone for your problems and your difficulties and your anxieties, 3 fingers, they point right back at yourself. When you point the finger at someone, 3 fingers, they point right back at yourself. We must engage in struggle. We must engage in struggle. Life is struggle. And the package, as Dr. Munir mentioned, the package that we have been given is a package that involves struggle. Some greater, and some not so great. But it's struggle nonetheless. It is jihad. It is jihad. And we hear people throwing this word about to and fro, but we really don't understand. We don't understand true struggle. And as an aside, I have a lot of interaction with many of my Christian colleagues, and we participate in many multi-faith events, and of course, we have to prepare ourselves. We have to know what our religion is all about, because Islam is a religion of knowledge before faith. It doesn't go the other way around. We must have knowledge before you have faith. You can't have faith in that which you don't know. And that's what actually causes us a lot of difficulty. We don't really know. We don't really understand. If someone were to say, "Why are you a Muslim?" Some of us perhaps would have a difficult time to explain. Well, my father, I'm from this country, we're all Muslims there. No, that's not a satisfactory. You have to know, because you have to have knowledge before you have faith. So I was approached by someone, they said, what is this? What is all this jihad business? Why are you Muslims in this jihad? What is all this stuff about? And of course, I said, well, I have to be honest. I said, well, the word is misunderstood. We throw it about in a very reckless way without much understanding. And, I said, what about all this war stuff? This fighting? What's all this stuff about? I said, well, I have to be honest. There are different dimensions to the word. As Dr. Munir mentioned, much is lost in translation, Those who are native to language understand the nuances, the subtleties of language. They understand, they feel it. You can feel the language. But things get lost in translation. But you know how each license plate has a slogan? Ontario, yours to discover. Quebec, je me souviens, I remember. I'm not quite sure what they remember, but they remember something in Quebec. Je me souviens. Friendly Manitoba. I grew up in Manitoba. It's true. The license plate reflects a particular reality of the people who live there. And this particular individual was asking me about this concept of jihad, in particular, this militaristic definition of what's this all about? well, I couldn't be dishonest. I say, yes, there is a dimension that relates to self-defense, but it's not something particularly controversial. This is for all the young people here in particular, because you'll be asked a lot of questions about your faith, but our religion is very intelligent. Very, very intelligent. And just by observing the slogans on license plate, has anyone ever been to New Hampshire? You know where New Hampshire is? New Hampshire's in the northeast United States. And they have a slogan too on their license plate. You know what it says? It says, live free or die. Did you hear what I said? Live free or die. So I just thought, I said to myself, well, you know what? I mean, the simple, nice suburban folks of New Hampshire, they have an idea of that particular, live free or die. This is all it is. The people in New Hampshire understand this. I'm sure you can understand it too. But anyway, the struggle. The jihadun nafs. The struggle of the nafs. We are made of 3 different components. And I'll make this as easy as possible. We're made of 3 different components as human beings. Like, you know, how would we define a human being? Who is a human being? What is the, you know, what does it mean to be a human being? Well, it seems as though we have three parts. Number 1, we have our nafs. And our nafs is what? Our nafs is basically our, you know, our personality. They translate it as the self. Sometimes they say soul, you know. It's our emotions, our angers, our wants, our likes, our dislikes, our desires. It's basically who we are, our nafs. And there are different degrees of nafs. There are different degrees of the self, you know. The second dimension of the human personality, we could say, is ruh, is spirit. We all have what's called spirit, ruh. Sometimes in English they use self, soul, spirit interchangeably, but we make a distinction. The soul, the self, that's nafs, but the spirit is definitely ruh. The spirit is not nafs. At least I don't believe that would be an accurate translation. The ruh is spirit. And we don't really know a lot about the nature of the ruh, the nature of our spirit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given that spark to us, but the nature of that spark is not clear to us. But we know it is of a divine origin. And to have life means that you have spirit. You're given that. The third dimension of the human personality is what is referred to as qalb, as heart. Not the physical heart in the body, although it's related to the physical heart, but it's more of a spiritual heart. It's more of a spiritual heart. So we have our nafs, we have our ruh, and we have qalb. We have our self, our personality, we have our spirit, and we have our qalb. So how do they work with each other? How do they interact with each other? You can imagine the human personality as a radio. A radio. So you have some radios that are really big. You have some radios that are, have a lot of bass. I like those radios, a lot of bass. We're from Jamaica, so we like, the bass has to be, proper, right? So the bass has to, the radio has to have some, some oomph to it, right? You need the oomph, or else you can't really, well, I remember it used to be like that, right? But you need a radio like that. The radio is basically the nafs. The radio is the nafs. The ruh, the spirit, is basically the electricity that comes into the radio. Because the radio can't work except with electricity. The electricity is the spirit that we have. And the electricity is it's very mysterious, you know. But nonetheless, you need that to turn the radio on. That's the ruh. And then the qalb, the heart, is what? The heart is the cord that brings the electricity into the radio. And if the cord is not working properly, or there's an obstruction in the cord, the radio will not function to the best of its ability. So if the cord is not clean, it's not perfect, then the electricity cannot inform the radio to turn on and to work properly. So therefore, your qalb, your heart, must be the focus. The nafs has personality. And we have the nafs that is absorbed in selfishness, the nafsi amara, you know, the nafs that is absorbed in selfishness, basically a prisoner of itself. Whatever your nafs calls you to, you approach it. It's out of control. The nafs, or the cattle-like nafs, will call you to only a handful of things. Basically eating, drinking, sleeping, and copulating. That's it. That's basically it. And the struggle that our young people have, in a very explicit way, everyone has this struggle. And we all need to eat, we all need to sleep, we all need to drink. But there are limits and there are borders. And there must be an ability within each one of us to say no. To say no. In fact, the first words that children learn after mama is usually no. You ever notice that? I have 4 children, and I'm telling you, I think I'm right. After they learn mama, it's no, 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 no. This is what they know. They know no. They know no. They know la. They know no. They know. Kids seem to have some sort of, in their nature, they know. No. You know? Even though, no. They know how to say no. They know that. They know it. And it's amazing because even our shahada begins with no. La ilaha. There is no God except the one God. No. No. And even in my discussion with some of my Christian colleagues, I said, look, we all need limits because they have a lot of questions, you know. How come you Muslims can't drink? You mean you Muslims, you mean you can't smoke dope, or you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. No. Well, look, look, it's not like that, you know. Sometimes saying no is a means of really saying yes to that which is good. To say no. And I said, even in your own religion, if you look at the 10 Commandments, I grew up in the church, so I still remember the 10 Commandments. And the overwhelming majority of the 10 Commandments begin with thou shalt not. I will say no to this. I will say no to that. I will say no to idolatry. I will say no to making a graven image of the Creator. I will say no to murder, to theft, to coveting thy neighbor's wife. I will say no to all of these things. But there's one positive commandment, which is what? I will honor thy mother and my father. I will honor them. I will honor them. So even built into these traditions is this effort to say no, because the self has to be tamed. It has to be placed under control. You have to learn how to say no. When your parents say no to you, it's a means of your freedom. They have to say no, or else you will lead yourself to destruction.
They have to say no. They say you have to be inside by this time. No, you cannot go out with this person. No, you cannot do this. No, you cannot wear that outside of the house. We need to be trained so our nafs can move from that selfish stage to a stage where we begin to start to question ourselves. We start to blame ourselves. We start to work on ourselves and recognize that, yeah, we need a talking to. That we have to learn how to talk to ourselves. We have to learn how to conversate with ourselves. But we have a hard time with that. You ever been in a room with a lot of different people? Listen, you ever been in a room with a lot of different people and nobody's talking? Everybody's just sitting in a circle or sitting whatever, and there's no TV, there's no radio, there's nothing, but you're just sitting there. How long does it take before someone says, come on, say something? Why don't you talk? What's wrong with you people? Say something. What's going on? You know, am I being jumped or what's going on? Someone has to talk. But you think the problem is we don't like silence. We don't like to talk to ourselves. Why? Because perhaps we're a bit afraid. We're afraid of what we're going to find within ourselves. We're going to realize that, man, I'm a mess. You're alone, you start talking, your mind starts, thinking about everything, and you just say, man, I'm a mess. I am a mess. But when you begin to learn how to speak to yourself, talk to yourself, you blame yourself, you feel a concern about what you do, what you don't do, you're concerned about that, then your nafs has moved into a stage of, of blaming, lawama. It's like you blame yourself and you recognize that there's something within you that needs to be tamed. That your lower cattle-like, animalistic, selfish nafs, it needs to be tamed. You recognize it and you understand it. So you begin to think about what you're seeing, what you look at. You're conscious of what you see. You're conscious of what you hear. You're conscious of what you say. You're conscious of your level of anger. You're conscious of these things. You're aware of these things. Very, very important. If you come to that point, your nafs can move even further. Your nafs can move as well. Your nafs can move to a state where it's at peace, at rest. Where in fact you kill your nafs, you kill it. And your intentions, your motivations are directed solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There once was this man. There was this man and he was living in this village. And this village, the people had begun to worship an idol. And we know, what did I say at the beginning? I said that the first commandment of Islam is to worship none but Allah. You remember that? Yes. We worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this pious man, he was living in this village, and he discovered that the people of the village, they began to worship a tree. They started to worship a tree. Is everybody with me? Yeah. They began to worship this tree. And as a pious man, as a man who understands that the first command is to worship God and God alone, he decided to chop down this tree. So what happened is he went into the shed and got his knife, or as we say in Jamaica, his machete, and he began sharpening his machete, sharpening and sharpening. He goes out to chop down the tree. Along the way, he meets this man, and this man asks him, "Hey, where are you going?" The pious man says, I'm going to chop down this tree because my people have taken it as an idol. I'm going to chop down this tree. So the stranger says to him, look, I can't let you do that. The pious man says, no, I have to chop it down. We are forbidden from worshiping idols. So I must chop down this tree. So the stranger says, no, I can't let you do that. The pious man says, no, get out of my way. I'm going to chop down the tree. The stranger says, no, you're not going to chop down this tree. So finally, they start fighting. They're rolling around in the sand, exchanging blows, fighting for at least 15 minutes. They're fighting back and forth. But finally what happens is, the pious man subdues the stranger and is about to finish him off, right? About to finish him off. So the stranger says, wait. Let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. So the pious man says, okay, what's your deal? The stranger says, I will give you silver coins every day for the rest of your life. Just don't chop down that tree. Think of all the charity, think of all the good, think of all the good you could do. You could free the poor, the destitute, the needy, feed the hungry. Think of all the, I'll give you silver coin every day, rest of your life, done. The pious man said, okay, fine. He said yes. Because he thought about the good that he could do with the money to feed the people, to help the people. He said, okay, it's a deal. So he went back to his home, put away his mashed, and got up the next morning, opened his door, he saw a silver coin. He took the silver coin, went out into the society, gave it to the poor, the needy, the destitute, the hungry, etc. Went back to his home, went to sleep. Next day, woke up, silver coin, took the silver coin again, did the same thing. This went on and on and on and on until one day he woke up, opened his door, no coin. So went back to his shed, got his mashhed. He starts sharpening his mashhed. He goes out to do what? To chop down the tree. Along the way, who does he meet? The stranger. The strange man says, hey, where you going? Pious man says, no, none of that. I'm going to chop down that tree. The stranger says, no, I can't let you do that. The pious says, no, get out of my way. Get out of my way. I'm going to chop down that tree. I'm going to chop it down. No, you can't. Pious says, yes. They start to fight. This time for 13 minutes. They start to fight. Back and forth. But this time what happens is the stranger subdues the pious man and is about to finish him off. So the pious man says, whoa, what is this? Yesterday I defeated you, but today you defeated me. What is this? What is this? What is this? So the stranger looked at him with contempt and said, before you fought me for Allah. You fought me for Allah, but today you're fighting me for what? The silver coins. You lose because you're fighting me for the silver coins. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. All deeds are judged by the intention, which is a state that is internal. Today you fight me for the coins. Brothers and sisters in Islam, understand, we have to ask ourselves, what is the solution to our difficulties and our maladies and our struggle? What is the solution? It's very, very simple. It's very, very simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu dhkurullaha dhikran kathira. Oh, you who believe, remember Allah as much as you can. Remember Allah. Remember Allah. How do you allow your spirituality to inform your personality? How do you do that? You need to have a pure heart. And the only way to have a pure heart is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Standing, sitting, and reclining. I never understood. Have you ever heard a lot of people say this? They say, I'm not very religious, but I'm spiritual. Have you ever heard that before? Many people say that, And I used to kind of, wonder, what does that mean? I'm not religious, I don't follow it, but I'm spiritual. But I understand it. Because we all have within us a light. Every human being. Every human being has within them a light that has been given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're taught that every human being is born on their primordial nature, right? They're born with that divine light that is given by God Almighty. Regardless of where you're born, whether you're born here, whether you're born in India, whether you're born in Russia, Jamaica, Guyana, Bosnia, Somalia, wherever you're born with that nature. But it's your environment, your circumstances, your package perhaps, that places you or cultivates that primordial nature, or perhaps compromises it. So all of us possess that. So when someone says they're spiritual, it means they want to connect to that. They want to connect to that. Perhaps the vehicle which they travel towards that spirituality, perhaps they need to understand how to journey. But it's a natural inclination that we have that's internal, that's the light. So therefore, with remembrance of God, with the remembrance of God, we can find peace. And there's no greater gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. No gift greater than our qalb. There's no gift greater. Nothing. Because it's through our qalb that we can filter. We can filter the spirituality to impress upon our personality. And when that happens, then indeed we can be people who can realize this beautiful inner image, this khuluq, this inner image, this beautiful reflection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, listen to this. Who have believed and whose hearts have rest in the remembrance of Allah, verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. That's where we find the rest, brothers and sisters. This is where we find the peace. This is where we find the tranquility. This is where we find it. And regardless of how old you are, what circumstance you're in, you don't have to be Sheikh so-and-so, Imam so-and-so. No, dhikr. To make dhikr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as I mentioned before, that every moment has a supplication. Every moment has a dhikr, a remembrance. So that you can recall that indeed you have been created for no purpose except to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember Allah. Remember Allah. Make dhikr. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every circumstance. Whether you're at school, when you're in class, when you're with your friends, and perhaps you may be oriented in a direction that maybe is not appropriate for your religious commitment. Remember Allah. That's the solution. That is the solution. Finally, brothers and sisters, I want to read something. And I want you just to indulge me. Is everybody okay? Everybody's okay? Are you sure? Alhamdulillah. I'm only going to be a few more minutes. But I want to read something to all of you. And inshallah, you can take it for what it is. And inshallah, if there's anything that you can remember from this talk, alhamdulillah. Excellent. Any mistake or any error is from shaitan. And I forgive me for this. But anything good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I want to read you something by a very famous, among the most famous of shuyukh of Islam, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. May Allah's mercy be upon him. I want to read this to you and just, just feel it, inshallah. Just feel it, inshallah. Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, he says, strike at your lower self with the dagger of tawheed, the dagger of oneness. Wear the helmet of helpful guidance and wield the spear of pure struggle, the shield of devotion and the sword of certainty, so as to engage it at times in either thrusting or cutting action. You must keep this up until the lower self, the nafs, submits to you humbly, and you become its rider, holding its reins in your hand as you travel with it over land and sea. At this stage, your Lord will point to you proudly. Then you will be put in charge of those who remain stuck with their lower self and have failed to escape from its control. When one really knows and has gained mastery of his own self, of his nafs, the self becomes a beast of burden. The self, the nafs, becomes a beast of burden. For him, like a camel that does not obey his command. There is nothing good in you until you really know your lower self, until you know your nafs. Restrain it from indulgence and give it its proper due. Only then will it become harmless in relation to the heart. while the heart becomes tame with regards to the innermost being, and the innermost being becomes submissive to the Lord of truth. Do not spare your lower self the rod of dedicated struggle, jihad. Do not be deceived by its cunning strategies. Do not be taken in by the apparent sleep of the predator, for he is only letting you think he is asleep while waiting to pounce upon his prey. O young person, you must endeavor to die right here. To die right here in the presence of the Lord of truth, meaning die before you truly die. That the self has to die. Your inner inclinations, your selfishness, it has to die before you physically die. Then indeed you will be free. The Shaykh says you must endeavor to die right here in the presence of the Lord of truth. You must strive to have your lower self die before your spirit leaves your body. Its death will come about through patience and opposition, and then you will soon celebrate the result. Your patient suffering will cease. Your patient suffering will cease, but its reward will never disappear. I have practiced patience and seen the worthy outcome. I died, then He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, revived me and then caused my body to die. I vanished from existence, then He brought me back again out of my invisibility. I perished in His company and was empowered in His company. I struggled against my lower self by giving up the practice of choice and will. Of choice and will, until destiny began to guide me. Until destiny began to guide me. Mercy started to help me, action to move me, jealous care to safeguard me, the will to obey uplift me, and qadr, preordination, to promote me, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began to raise me. Brothers and sisters in Islam, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us on the straight path, the path of those whom He has blessed, and not the path of those who earn His anger, His curse, His vexation, nor those who go astray. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us true freedom. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to return home, to return to Jannah safely, with a sound heart, a beautiful heart, a complete heart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to travel in this earth as sincere travelers. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala return us home safely and of sound mind and of sound heart. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower His peace and His blessings upon our beloved Master Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, his family, his companions, and the righteous everywhere. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.